City County Planning Commission, please come to order. Ms. Martin, would you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Rich? Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Balance? Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Coppinger?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren? Commissioner Madison?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Houston?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. Everyone's had a chance to review the summary minutes of the July 19th meeting. It was in the packet. Do you have any, were there any corrections to those minutes? No corrections? Then I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. In a second. Thank you.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Balance? Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Coppinger?
Abstain.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Madison?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Houston?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am.
Rather, I request that you order that the Warren County zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive plan with all of its elements effective August 2nd, 2018, be introduced for tonight's hearings. I'd further request that you order the staff reports, all attachments, together with the Commission's file for each application, be introduced as exhibits. Finally, I'd ask that Ben Peterson, Executive Director, Rachel Hurt, Planner, and Monica Ramsey, Planner, be sworn as witnesses before you, and that their oath and qualifications be reflected in the record for each hearing.
So ordered. Swear to tell the truth before this commission. Thank you all. The preliminary subdivision and site development plans. Any questions on any of those, commissioners? No questions. We'll move on. If you got your amended agenda at your desk tonight, you'll see that there's one item under the letters of credit and performance bond. Any question on that item? No questions, and I'd ask for a motion. Thank you. We need a second. Thank you.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Balance? Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Coppinger?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert? Commissioner Gay?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Madison?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Houston?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. First item tonight for public hearing is from the unfinished business of our last meeting. That was docket number 2018-34ZBG, Rose Valley Banquet Hall, has filed an application to rezone a tract of land containing approximately 1.799 acres located at 140 Hunter Court from general business with a general development plan to light industrial with a general development plan. And we will have the staff report from Ms. Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair Runner. We had a pre-application conference for the property you see here outlined in yellow on June 14th. As Chair Runner has already said, this property is zoned general business. It's a public institutional use currently. A church has been occupying that space for a while now. As you can see, a lot of that around there is industrial with single family to the rear there, and then of course some commercial on Scottsville Road. And future land use is mixed use commercial. I'll go ahead and put the exhibit up and then reference that as we go forward. The applicants are proposing to rezone this to operate a granite countertop business in the existing building. This property was originally zoned agriculture, then rezoned from ag to light industrial in 1978. And then in 2002, it was rezoned from light industrial to general business. So tonight, the applicants are requesting to take it back to light industrial. The property is designated as mixed-use commercial on the future land use map. The proposed light industrial district is listed as a potentially compatible zone in the mixed-use commercial future land use map designation. The Planning Commission should determine if the proposal is compatible with the surrounding area. The only thing I'll point out to you below that in the compatibility with the surrounding development is the sentence there that says there is a mature tree line along the rear property line and a sinkhole toward the rear half of the property, which I'll talk just briefly about here in a second. At the bottom of your staff report on the first page, points to consider. The proposal is consistent with the flume and mixed-use commercial category. The proposed development complies with the majority of the site characteristics review criteria, and the proposed general development plan complies with the majority of the review criteria for site design and compatibility and meets the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. So if you go to page 2 there, we have our future land use map and category review. The only two I will bring to your attention that are up for you all to decide is LU2. So you all should decide if it's a high quality development that includes design standards tailored to protect the character of the area, As you can see here on the exhibit, the only thing that is not currently on that site today is some possible outdoor storage to the rear of the existing building there. And then below that, LU 253, and it's up to you all to determine if this is an opportunity for revitalization and redevelopment. On page 3, the layout, lot sizes, and setbacks, again, this is a proposal to use the existing building with the outdoor storage in the back. Natural features, I mentioned that mature tree line. The applicants have committed to preserving that in Development Plan Condition 1. And so that's really all I wanted to point out there. We will go to page 4 with the Development Plan conditions. Number 1, all existing vegetation along property line bordering the adjacent residential property shall remain. Number 2, any outdoor storage of granite will be done to the rear of the existing building. Number 3, machine cutting of granite shall be performed inside the building. And number 4, you have some prohibited uses there. Number 5, the existing access point will be utilized as is. Any future change to the existing access to the property will have to be coordinated and approved by the Bowling Green Department of Public Works. So at the bottom there, our staff review summary. The applicants are proposing to repurpose the existing site for a granite countertop business. This proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process, and it is up to you all to determine if this is compatible with the area. So that is all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Is the outdoor storage going to be fenced so it won't be shown to everybody?
I'm not aware of a fence. That might be a better question for the applicants. They are here, as I'm aware, so I'm sure they'd be happy to address that.
Any other questions before we hear from the applicant? No other questions? The applicant.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you'd state your name and address for us, please.
Bayram Ali, 3690 at Woodbridge Lane, Bowling
And-
Green, Kentucky.
And you swear to tell the truth before this commission?
Well, of course.
Yes.
Brian Shirley, 1136 South Park Drive, and that's where to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir. You had a question? You may.
The outdoor storage will be fenced and screened according to the landscape requirements. And the material in there is fairly heavy, so I don't think anybody's going to be able to pick it up and walk away with it. But
No, I knew it wouldn't be stolen, but just as an eyesore for neighbors and et cetera.
we'll be preserving all the vegetation at the rear of the
Good.
property. So it's going to look pretty much like it is now. The access point, we don't foresee any change that would be needed. It's an existing access point that was there for the commercial or the industrial stuff that was there before. Existing parking is going to be utilized. And the idea of the outdoor storage, maybe in the future, initially be storing material inside.
Come in by semis or large trucks. Would that fit through there, carrying these big slabs?
It may not be semis, but it'll be a longer axle truck that will probably have a small crane on it to be able to pick the material up and drop it down.
Other questions, commissioners? Do we have any questions from anyone in the audience concerning this application? No questions. Do we have any opposition to this request? No opposition? Nothing else? Anything you'd like to add before I call for a motion? Nothing? Then I will ask for a motion, please.
Make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the General Development Plan Docket 2018-34ZBG based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 Comprehensive Plan as demonstrated by the compliance with the following objectives and actions. LU111, LU112, LU113, LU2, LU214, LU231, LU253, TR21, PR17, NCR116, NCR241, ED3. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further request this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you, sir. We need a second. Thank you.
Commissioner Houston,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Madison,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Vitale,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Balance, Commissioner Volkert, Commissioner Clark, Commissioner Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Coppinger, Chair Runner.
Yes, ma'am. The motion carried. Our recommendation will be for approval. Thank you. Next item tonight, Docket number 2018-37Z County. CPR Farms LLC and Luke Williams have filed an application to rezone a portion of tracts of land containing approximately 256.39 acres located at 0 and 2520 Cumberland Trace Road and 0 Shaker Mill Road with frontage on Shaker Bend Avenue and Shaker Mill Road bounded by I-65 and Drakes Creek from agriculture and floodplain to public RM3, which is townhouse multifamily residential, and RS1A and RS1C, which are both single-family residential and floodplain with a general development plan. And we'll have the staff report from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Runner and Commissioners. So you have to bear with me tonight. This is a big development and therefore a long staff report, and we've got a lot of new stuff before you tonight. Some changes that will be proposed, I think, by the applicant. I'll try to mention those as I go through, but I'm sure they will correct me if I miss something or get something wrong. At your chairs, you have new conceptual drawings and some elevations that will reference throughout this presentation. You also have a memo concerning the connectivity and the connection, which we'll get more into. And then concerning that connection to Shaker Mill Bend Road, we also have a petition that was submitted by neighbors on Shaker Mill Road as well that addresses that connection. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. You see the outline of the property that's proposed to be rezoned before you. In total, that outline is approximately 256 acres. In order to develop a maximum of 330 single-family residential lots, 120 multifamily residential units, and a possible new elementary school. Some of this proposal may have changed slightly. It's my understanding that the RS1A portion, which we'll point out when we get there, may be shrinking by approximately 12 acres and reducing by 18 lots. So it'd only be 312 single-family residential units, but I'll let the applicants address more of that when they get up there. Moving along through the staff report, we look at the existing zoning. It is agriculture and floodplain currently. The properties have been zoned agriculture since zoning was established in Warren County in 1972. Moving along, looking at the existing land use, you see that it is currently agriculture and vacant, and of course surrounded primarily by single-family and agriculture uses as well. There's some various uses across Cumberland Trace Road and I-65, but adjacent to this property is mostly agriculture and single-family. Looking at the future land use map, we see that this property is a combination of a little bit of low density here on kind of that southern portion of the proposed development, and the entirety of the rest of the property, the majority, is moderate density residential. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit too. Well, I'll go ahead and move on to page 2 of the staff report and start talking about our category reviews and how we review this with the comprehensive plan. Staff identified approximately 19 items for the comprehensive plan to analyze that we feel pertain to this development. Starting with the future land use map. Here you'll see the low-density residential category on that southern end, and then the majority of the rest of it is the moderate density. So the single-family, the low-density residential flume designation allows for single-family detached and attached single-family development, including twin homes that are platted on their own individual lots. And that future land use map category allows densities ranging from 0 to 4.5 dwelling units per acre. The moderate density, which is the majority of the property, encourages areas developed for higher density, single family, attached and detached homes, as well as multifamily development such as townhouses, apartment buildings, condos, and mobile home parks. Densities in this land use range between 3.5 and 13 dwelling units per acre. So the proposal, and we'll look at a density map a little later, but the proposal may comply with the flume in this category. The LU 111112 as the proposed density is only 1.76 dwelling units per acre, which is less than what the moderate density indicates is appropriate. So we have a situation where the developer is proposing to develop less dense than what the future land use map category allows. So the Planning Commission should determine if this less density is appropriate for this location. Looking at LU 113, the Planning Commission should also determine if this proposal is compatible with the surrounding area, which also leads to us to LU 2 and 2.1. If the proposed development is deemed to be of high quality, including the design standards tailored to preserve the character of the area. LU 211 encourages increased open space. Original staff report says the proposal does not comply with this, as the applicants have not committed to providing open space in the development. However, there is, in the new concept, there is an addition of some walking trails, mention of common space in the development plan conditions, and then if the school develops, there's going to be a certain amount of recreational space that is required with the school that will be open space that we don't normally see. Obviously, a school with a development such as this, so that is worth noting for that. Also mentions proposal does not comply with LU 214, PR 1.7, or NCR 1.6, as the applicants had not committed to preserving any of the existing trees. So with the development, it's my understanding that we may have an amendment to the development plan conditions that will address this. I'll let the applicant address that further as well. So the proposal generally complies with LU 2.3.1 and TR 2.1, and this is related to access and transportation improvements, and we'll go into that in quite a bit detail here in a little later on. The proposal complies with CF 5.3 as there is adequate water flow to meet the fire protection standards of the county. Regarding CF Community Facility 6 and 6.1, the proposed school will help in accommodating the current needs and enrollment projections in the area. The Planning Commission should determine if the site of the proposed school is consistent with the comprehensive plan policies for growth and development. Regarding NCR 1.1 and 1.3, the proposals were deemed out of compliance because the applicants at the time of the staff report was written had not addressed the portions of the development located within the floodplain or the portions of the development which contained a sinkhole or wetland, as there are several on the property, and nor did they address how they were going to minimize the impact of proposed development on the natural environment. However, they will have to comply with all of our local regulations that deal with sinkholes and not being allowed to amend the floodplain without proper approvals there. So there is some protection there. The proposal complies with NCR 2.4.1 because there is adequate infrastructure existing in the area to support this development. And then the proposal may comply with HN 2.1 and HN 4. It's our housing and neighborhoods section. The Planning Commission should determine if the location of the planned development is suitable for the proposed housing types, as we have a variety of housing types here, and if the proposed residences are believed to enhance the array of housing options in the area. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the concept plan and leave that up. So moving on to our site characteristics review, this is part of the concept that was submitted with the general development plan. Looking at the layout, lot sizes, and setbacks, the applicants must adhere and have agreed to adhere to the RS1A, RS1C, and RM3 standards in the zoning ordinance. And I'll go ahead and point out the different portions of the development. So this is Cumberland Trace Road here. Of course, I-65 would be just over here. So this is Cumberland Trace Road here, and then Shaker, it's hard to read on there, but that's Shaker Mill Bend here. So this front portion here is proposed to be the site of a possible elementary school. This color here is the multifamily residential, and this is the RS1C proposed housing lots there, and then the rest is RS1A here, and then a little portion here connecting to Shaker Mill Road, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then this portion here, I believe, is the portion that is proposed to be removed from the development tonight, which the applicant will verify. They're proposing to remove that. We rough estimates approximately 12 acres and 18 lots, and they're proposing to reduce the proposal by both that acreage and those number of lots for the RS1A section. Again, moving along through the site characteristics review, looking at the transportation infrastructure. I'll kind of try to end with that before I get to the development plan conditions. The next section there is dealing with the infrastructure. They have verified with all the appropriate agencies that there is adequate infrastructure to support the development. We've already talked about the natural features. Prime farmland, there is portions of the property that are designated prime farmland of statewide importance, and most of that, I think, is in that floodplain area, and it's our understanding that the floodplain areas are proposed to remain the same use they currently are, which I believe is mostly agriculture. Again, something else the applicant will probably verify. Moving on to site design and compatibility portion of the review, looking at the surrounding density. We'll go back to our density map here. So a map depicting the overall densities of surrounding neighborhoods is before you. Densities of existing subdivisions in the area ranged from 0.08 dwelling units per acre to 1.5 dwelling units per acre. And the overall density of the proposed development here is 1.76 dwelling units per acre. That if you remove the floodplain area that cannot be built upon, it's 2.78 dwelling units per acre is the approximation. And even with the removal of that acreage in the lots, that number's almost exactly the same. I think it went up a hundredth of the ratio there. So. This was well under the low and the moderate densities categories. As mentioned, the low density residential allows up to 4.5 dwelling units per acre, and the moderate up to 13. Surrounding architectural features, when we looked at that, there was a mixture of 1- and 2-story homes of varying ages in the area. They're all through Cumberland Trace Road area there. You have a mixture of old and new of the area. And the building materials review, that was addressed in the development plan condition, so I'll get to that in a bit. The building orientation, so that was previously not addressed, but with the new conceptual drawings that were submitted, I'll go ahead and show you the school here, which was the front portion. That is a proposed layout that is superimposed over the site. That shows that the school will be oriented towards Cumberland Trace Road, and then all of the proposed houses and the apartments and all of the rest of the land will be all oriented towards internal streets. Moving on to connectivity. So this is going to be probably a well-discussed topic tonight. The proposed development will is proposed to connect to the existing stub street on Shaker Mill Bend Road as required by the subdivision regulations. There's also a potential future connection to the property on the west that's depicted. So to point that out again, this is Shaker Mill Bend Road. There's an existing street that dead ends into the property here. that there's a proposed connection there with the neighborhood, and then the other connection is down here servicing a vacant lot that is over 10 acres, which is required by our subdivision regulations. Take a little time here to draw your attention to the memo that you should have before you. That was given to you by me. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things in that regarding connectivity. The Shaker Mill Bend subdivision was rezoned in 1981 from agriculture to RM2, and Section 2 of the subdivision, which is the one that connects to this proposed development, was platted in 1985, and a dead-end street was platted for future development, and this was accomplished under an old set of subdivision regulations. So during the January 15th, 1981 rezoning of the Shaker Mill Bend subdivision, the minutes indicated that the developer agreed to meet all applicable regulations at the time, which pulled the old subdivision regulations off the shelf. That was enacted at the time. They were in effect from March 18th, 1957 to July 15th of 1983. And Section 3C2A states that streets serve two principal functions: the movement of goods and people and access to adjoining properties. Section 3C4B stated that dead-end streets shall only be permitted as part of a continuing street plan. So I just wanted to note that for the record, that when the Shaker Mill Bend subdivision was platted and created and built, it was anticipating future development. Also, to be fair, pointed at your desk, you do have a petition from the Shaker Mill neighbors. The gist of that, which I'm sure they will speak to, is to not have that connection from the proposed development to Shaker Mill Bend Road that we pointed out earlier, kind of that north connection, if you will. So in discussing this with council, and Hamp can feel free to chime in and correct me if I misstate something, but the Planning Commission is not allowed to vote on a proposal that violates any of our regulations. So in order to, for this body to vote on not having a connection, you would probably have to amend the existing subdivision regulations and possibly the comprehensive plan in order to send a recommendation forward without a connection to Shaker Mill Bend Road. So I just wanted to make sure and state that as well.
So, Ben, really for our discussion tonight, we cannot even get into the discussion or thought of getting rid of the connection.
I would let Hamp probably answer that, Mr. Moore.
The subdivision regulations are not permissive on that issue. They require connectivity, and as such, your consideration of this development plan, one of those considerations would be whether or not that development plan meets the subdivision regulations. And as it is presently drafted, it violates the terms of the subdivision regulation because it does not permit connectivity. So I hope I've answered your question. Tell me if I haven't.
It appears to me that it does propose a connection currently. Am I misreading that?
Yes. So to be fair, and I'm sure the developer will speak to this too, I don't think the developer cares whether there's a connection or not, but the subdivision regulations require it, so they have shown that on their concept plan. And so they are proposing a connection because it's required. The neighbors would not like to have that connection per the petition, and I'm sure public comment tonight. We were just wanting to state for the record that the connection is required, and it is shown and it is proposed, but we don't think the Planning Commission can, without amending the regulations, send the plan forward without that connection.
So for the purpose of tonight's meeting, we cannot consider removing the connection to the street. Is that accurate?
That would be my, my interpretation, but I obviously yield to council.
Because the developer could not just make that street private, correct?
They could still make, the developer could make the portion that they own private, but it would still have to connect.
Still would have to connect?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you expand on that, please?
So we allow lots in Warren County, anywhere in Warren County, to be cut off a public or a private street. Even if you build a private street, it still has to be built to public standards. And so that is a different requirement than the connectivity. You still have to connect if there's an existing stub street to your property, or if there's an adjacent property that's 10 acres or larger, you have to provide the stub street for that future connection. So, if it's a public street, cannot be gated. Mm-hmm.
Private street, though.
If it's private, then sometimes the city or the county, either one, will allow gated communities.
But could you make
Just that one.
yeah,
That street.
That one street.
could you make
private.
just the one street private?
Don't know if that's a proposal, but I believe you
I'm
can.
just
Yeah.
I'm just
I'm just
asking,
asking, yeah.
because if you made it private
Mhm.
and he was willing to put a gate there, is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, if the legislative bodies accepts that, sure.
I mean, just from reading the petition and seeing all the people here, I'm gonna imagine that's gonna be the biggest issue.
Sure. So just getting into some of the reasons, we know the reasons why I think we would want the gate. The reasons why you wouldn't, would just be the 340 plus residents in that neighborhood. What's the purpose of the gate? Those would all still be able to get out and use the gate. So I'm not sure what the purpose of the gate is at that point, or they'd be able to come in. I mean, they'd still have the access because it would be that development's gate. So I don't know. I guess the other way to split it is you guys can certainly send the recommendation however you choose.
Turn the gate around, and the people from the outside are the only ones that can get in. So your emergency vehicles could get in.
I'm not sure how that would work, but
No.
I don't know if that would be allowed. I'm sure there'll be plenty more discussion on this in a minute.
I'm curious what we're gonna discuss if we can't. I mean, why, I mean.
If our hands are
I mean, our
tied.
If we cannot not.
So our requirement is just for the connection. Now, whether it's private or gated or not.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, you said there'll be more talk about the connectivity. I don't know what we're gonna talk about.
I assume none of these people are here to tell us that they want connectivity.
No, they want it, yeah.
Hamp, you got anything?
The development plan must conform to the subdivision regulations. In order for the development plan to conform to the subdivision regulations, there must be connectivity.
The staff report does not reflect any discussions with the County Public Works about it being private or gated, because that concept really just, at least from, okay, well, we'll address that in a minute. So I'll move on to the rest of the staff report. As far as pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities, of course, sidewalks will be required throughout the development. And then the revised concept plan also now shows a walking trail that was not previously on the plan. So the applicant may want to clarify the location of the walking trail. It's kind of hard to read, but the text for it is right here. I assume it's for along the backside somewhere, but they may want to clarify where the proposed location of that walking trail is. Moving on to the traffic impact on page 5 of the staff report. The applicants did consult with all the affected transportation agencies, the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, Warren County Public Works Department, and the Bowling Green Public Works Department. At one point, this was a question of whether or not this would be annexed. I'm not sure that's in the immediate plans, but but they were consulted as well. But all the agencies agreed to waive the traffic impact study in lieu of a commitment from the applicants for the following transportation improvements. And I'm going to go to some of the pictures here. But number one, they'll have dedicated left and right turn lanes into the development on Cumberland Trace Road at every entrance into the development. Design of the turn lanes are to be coordinated and approved with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Any access point on the Cumberland Trace Road shall be served by both a left and right turn lane. Design of such turn lanes to be coordinated and approved by the appropriate Public Works Department. So basically there'll be left and right turn lanes into the development, and then separate left and right turn lanes out of the development onto Cumberland Trace Road. And then number 3, there shall be no access to Shaker Mill Bend Road during construction, so no construction traffic, until such time the development streets have received at least a base asphalt coverage. To add to that, the portion of the development that is to be for the school has its, since it's a public institution, they have their own requirements by both the Department of Education and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. They will have to do a traffic impact study just for the school, and so they have committed in the public portion to make any improvements that are required by the Transportation Cabinet or the Department of Education. So moving on to the development plan conditions. So the development plan conditions have been submitted by the applicant I'll start with the RS1A and the RS1C single-family residential portion. So that's all of this property here, and then these properties here. There's number 1 is a maximum of, as written on the staff report, 80 RS1A lots. I believe that will be offered to be amended to now 62 RS1A lots. And there'll be no greater than 250 RS1C lots. And the portion of the property fronting Shaker Mill Road shall be limited to a maximum of 4 lots and shall not interconnect with the remaining portion of the development. So this is this little portion here connecting to Shaker Mill Road. And so these 4 proposed lots here, that access would have to be driveways, if you will, would be separate. There would be no connection to those properties, and those would have access from Shaker Mill Road. Item 2, each residence within the development shall have a minimum of 1,800 square feet of living space. Any living space constructed within any basement, garage, or porch, any floor space in any bonus room with a ceiling height of less than 6 feet, and any covered outdoor living space shall be excluded from the square footage calculation. Number 3, the development shall be served by internal streets, except for the lots which front on Shaker Mill Road. Location of any proposed driveways will be coordinated with the Warren County Public Works Department. Number 4, all structures will be constructed with at least 80% stone, brick, or other modern masonry material, or EIFS. Limited vinyl siding will be allowed only for areas such as soffits and dormers. No exposed plain face block foundations will be allowed. Number 5, the developer will establish a homeowners association Number 6, the developer will be responsible for maintaining all common open space until at least 60% of the lots have been developed and sold to third parties. At that time, they will transfer ownership and maintenance to the homeowners association. Number 7, architectural control and review of building plans and materials will remain with developers until at least 75% of the lots have been sold, after which the architectural control and review will, may be transferred to the property owners association. Number 8, all utilities shall be located underground. Number 9, the development will have uniform metal or fiberglass composite street lights and then also uniform mailboxes. Number 10, any propane gas tanks installed within the development shall be installed underground. And then number 11 deals with the access on Cumberland Trace Road, which we'd already addressed. 12 is the access to Shaker Mill Bend Road being closed off during construction until the streets have at least received an asphalt base. Number 13, the development shall have no direct access to Shaker Mill Road, with the exception of the 4 individual lots referenced in the development plan condition number 1. Again, that's those four lots up in the area there. Number 14 deals with the dedicated right and left turn lanes onto Cumberland Trace Road. Number 15, as the development plan conditions number 2, 4, 7, and 10 shall be included as binding elements only until such time a plat is filed and recorded, then they will be made plat restrictions. The next section is the RM3 development plan conditions. Should be a maximum of 120 dwelling units. No building shall include more than 4 dwelling units. So again, this is we're talking about this multifamily section here. So each building shall have no more than 4 dwelling units. No building shall exceed 2 stories above finished grade. All the utilities will be underground. The development will be served by internal streets. We have the same, pretty much the same construction materials. Be limited to 80% stone brick or other modern mason materials or EIFS. Vinyl will only be allowed in soffits and dormers with no plain face blocks will be allowed. Number 6, we'll have uniform or metal fiberglass composite street lights, and then also uniform mailboxes. Number 7 deals again with the same access considerations on Cumberland Trace Road. 8, no access to Shaker Mill Bend Road during construction. And number 9 deals with the dedicated left and right turn lanes onto Cumberland Trace Road. And then off of Cumberland Trace Road as well, be coordinated with the Transportation Cabinet. Then last but not least is the area for public where the proposed school is here. So the property will be developed with no more than 2 access points onto Cumberland Trace Road. A traffic study will be completed prior to the issuance of a building permit. The property will be developed with all transportation improvements recommended in the study and approved by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Such improvements shall be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And I think we have, so I'll stop here for just a second. So that's the elevation of what is proposed. I think it's similar to the Jennings Creek that's currently being constructed. And then there is a conceptual that we saw earlier. The principal structures on the premises will be constructed with an exterior of at least 75% brick, stone, or other cementitious material, excluding plain face block. Number 3, the total gross floor area under roof on the property shall not exceed 125,000 square feet. Any building expansion in excess of 125,000 square feet will require approval by the Planning Commission and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Number 4, all exterior lighting shall be focused inward and downward to minimize light trespass or reflection onto any adjoining properties. Number 5, signage will be limited to 1 sign on Cumberland Trace Road. This limitation shall not apply to directional signs. So to summarize and to kind of wrap up is we're proposing to develop a schools, single-family residential, and multifamily residential units as generally depicted on this conceptual plan. And this proposal generally complies with the majority of the review criteria listed in the process. The Planning Commission should determine if the proposal is compatible with the area and meets the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Peterson, these questions are kind of softballs for you, but
I hope so.
Just to get in the record.
Especially since you set it up for me.
The subdivision regs in section 5.7J, of course, set forth the mandate for stub streets and connectivity, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That section of the subdivision, however, provides an exception to that rule.
That is correct.
Not. And the exceptions to the rule, which may be approved by staff, include these conditions. If the adjacent use is incompatible, or if the project engineer can show substantive geologic, hydrologic, or safety issues, such as excessively steep grade. In either case, then the stub street or dedicated easement may not be required. Did I read correctly?
Yes, sir.
So is it your interpretation that the regs permit you to find an exception?
Yes.
But it is a staff exception.
Correct.
And one that is to be considered at the time of the subdivision review.
Correct. But to further that, in these situations, we go ahead and have the consultation with the appropriate Public Works Department and/or the KYTC to address any of those things. So we don't have to get to this point if we don't need to. And it was the opinion of the County Public Works Director that there was sufficient infrastructure in regards to this to have this connection, and along with the normal public safety concerns. So no exceptions were determined.
Now, finally, we all know from experience that the decision as to the closure of roads located in the county is one that may be made by the fiscal court.
Yes, sir.
So what you're saying is fiscal court could actually close the road?
They could and have.
Have any other questions for Mr. Peterson from the commissioners before we hear from the applicant?
One more question. Did you say that the city was contemplating bringing this into the city?
Well, I'm sure they are. The city would probably like to bring lots of properties into the city, so I'm sure they are. At this time, there is no annexation paperwork that has been filed, to my knowledge. The applicant
Because that would
may be.
matter with the
Yeah.
school. It would be a city school or a county school if they annexed, or would it
Yes,
always
no,
be a county
it's
school?
all, yeah, so there's several county schools in the cities. The school districts are their own independent governments and districts and have their own separate boundaries. So this would still be a county school regardless of annexation. Mm-hmm.
Anything else, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And we'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Chair Runner. Chris Davenport on behalf of Mr. Williams, the applicant.
And I will say
Yes, ma'am.
that with our ground rules, since we do have a crowd tonight,
Yes, ma'am.
that you have your 15 minutes and you will be timed.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we can have an answer and questions from the audience, from anyone with your witnesses. Then the opposition, if they are represented by an attorney, will have their 15 minutes. If they are not and they are individual comments, they will be limited to 3 minutes apiece. And with those comments, I would please ask that there be no repetition, that once an item of concern is in the record, we understand that more than one of you may have that same concern. So we don't need to have everyone continue, but we do want anyone who wants to speak or add information to do that. So I apologize, Mr.
Oh, no
Davenport.
apology, Chair.
And, yes, sir.
So, Ms. Runner, along those lines that you just mentioned, you might inquire if anyone in the audience, including Mr. Davenport, have any questions for Mr. Peterson.
Yes, yes. Questions for Mr. Peterson?
I do not at this point, so.
Anyone in the audience questions, or do you want to wait with the attorneys? No questions? You have a question for his staff report? Concerning his staff report? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just come forward. No, we'll have to get you to the podium, swear you in, and let you ask your question. I apologize for that, but it's okay. No, ma'am.
No one else will want another
No,
question
ma'am,
after
don't
this.
No, ma'am, please don't apologize. If you'll just state your name and address.
My name is Jan Perkins, and I live at 362 Shaker Mill Bend Road.
And you swear to tell the
I
truth?
swear.
There you go. Now you can ask your question.
So, when you presented your project, you presented the proposed subdivision and the way out to Cumberland Trace. You pictured it, you did all that. You showed the out in 3 lanes and all of that. The proposed connection to Shaker Mill Bend, you did not show a pictorial or how they would then get to Cemetery Road. So I would like to know, Shaker Mill Bend is a wide 24-foot, is that right? And there's 81 people on Shaker Mill Bend and Shaker Mill Road. The 24-foot goes to a 14-foot, 16-foot at the widest, onto Cemetery Road with 300 more houses, 320, 312, whatever it is. So that's like almost 4 times. And it doesn't even get a yellow line because it's not wide enough to have a yellow line on it.
So I guess my first response to that is I am not the applicant. I'm just the staff member who presented the application. So it's not my development
Okay,
and
let me
not
go to
my
you.
road. So that's the first thing. So, but I will say that the county public works director, when he looked at this proposal, did look at all of those factors and deemed that there was not any improvements that would be required by this developer for Shaker Mill Road. Shaker Mill Bend Road is right at 24 foot wide and was constructed under the current subdivision regulations, and so no improvements were required to Shaker Mill Bend Road either. So not necessarily probably what you want to hear, but that's the answer.
That makes no logical sense, right?
But
Okay, you wouldn't have an addition like that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. This is the time to ask questions for the staff report, and you did that, and I hope Mr. Peterson was able to answer it, and we'll get the applicant, and you may want to ask him too when he comes up. So
I have another question.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So before you all vote, and I'm sure everyone's going to ask this, or me, have any of you been out to the Shaker Mill Bend area and the Shaker Mill Road area to see that?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you done that at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 5 in the night?
Question for me,
I'm not going to say that I was there at 8 in the
Okay.
morning or 5 at night. No.
Those
no,
are good
no.
rhetorical questions.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
And it wasn't wanted an answer like he said. I was
Yes,
just-
yes. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Davenport.
Yes, ma'am. Let me take care of some housekeeping first, and I think Ben mentioned there would likely be some changes or revisions to the application. Seated here to my right is Mr. Louder, Brian Louder, and Mr. Scott Neighbors was here. He's the president of the Cumberland Ridge Homeowners Association. And my client and they have worked over the scope of the last week or so to try to address their concerns the best that we could. And in so doing, we've reached an agreement that I'm going to take out a portion of the property that was to be rezoned, and it would be this portion that's not contiguous to the remaining, and I'm going to request that be withdrawn from the application. Mr. Moore, I've got a letter from Ms. Martin that reflects that.
Let me ask if you want to circle the lots you want to remove from the application and exhibit to the record tonight. And then if you'll, after you do that, show the folks in the room on the overhead projector what you've circled.
Where would the projector be?
Well, with the pointer, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, it's this area right here. Yes, ma'am. Approximately 12 acres. I think that's right. That's what at least Ms. Hurt and Mr. Peterson estimated that at. So that would be one revision. I've got a couple additional development plan conditions, Mr. Moore, I need to read into the record. And these are also reflected in the letter. The developer shall take reasonable steps to maintain mature and healthy trees having a caliper of no less than 8 inches. It'd be a new DPC on the single family
RS1A.
and RS1C.
Okay. So it will be new number 16?
Correct.
All right. So if you'll read that again. And you say this is in your letter?
It's in a letter I'm getting ready to hand to Ms. Martin.
I'll stop interrupting you then.
And the developer shall install a 50-foot wide landscape buffer along the back of any lot that adjoins Cumberland Ridge subdivision. That would now be, for the purposes of everyone's information, right here. This having been removed from the rezoning application. That would apply right there. So, if I may, Jessica. And with that, it's a little bit out of order, but I really don't want those folks to sit here all night. If that is, with those amendments, if that does satisfy the request of the Cumberland Ridge Homeowners Association and their attorney, if they would stand up and support the application as amended, I would appreciate that very much. So that the commission is aware of those steps we took to gain their support for the application. Thank you all. Moving on. So a few points I want to make about this. Always try to highlight, for the most part, Ben, I think very accurately gave you the high points. This request is flume compliant. In fact, I think it's the first development that I've presented that's actually below the flume. The vast majority of this property has a designation of moderate density residential, and we are way below that. Way below that. We are essentially on the low end of low density. So that's the first point I want to make. Secondly, there's always an issue of compatibility and the design standards. I think you'll find that the design standards of this development are very high, 80% brick, stone, so forth and so on. If you look through those, and I still want to call them binding elements, so I'm just going to have to get used to development plan conditions, but if you look through those, I think you'll find the standard development plan conditions that you find in our more recent and newer neighborhoods regarding tanks and driveway, all that stuff that you have become accustomed to seeing now. There is a small pocket here, relatively speaking, of multifamily. It's always a pleasure when I get to come before you with a multifamily component, and that's really not the hot topic. And I don't think that is tonight. And the reason I don't think it is this is an example of a development that wraps that multifamily. We have in our comp plan numerous policies of trying to give varying housing types and sizes. And a lot of the times what you folks see is a development plan comes in and the higher density housing is located somewhere, the multifamily component's here. In this plan, that multifamily, and by the way, it is multifamily, but it's patio homes. If you look at those development plan conditions, we're talking about brick and stone patio homes, no more than 4 units a building. So it's maybe not the type of project you think of when you hear multifamily. This is a patio home product, but it's in the middle of the development. We're building around that within our own development. So obviously, the other thing that's a little bit strange here or unique, and it's a very good thing, is we've got the school as a component. I think, anytime from a planning standpoint, you folks can get a larger development that has these types of uses integrated and planned ahead of time, again, my personal opinion, but that's a lot better than trying to fit square pegs through round holes sometimes. This is a very well thought out as it flows from the school to the multifamily and to the single family. We always hear issues about traffic. That's not uncommon before the commission. I guess I just want to highlight that we talked to the state, we talked to the city, we talked to the county, and all of the traffic improvements they wanted, we have obliged ourselves to doing. Those are primarily dedicated left-hand and right-hand turns at all access, ingress, and egress points. Things a little bit different about this application is because the school is a component, and I think Mr. Pardue's here, attorney for the school board, they are actually, there'll be a second level of traffic review on this case. Before they can open their school, the state education department has to look at the traffic improvements that we've made and make sure those are adequate. So there's actually, even outside of our review and the DDP's review, there's a review that we don't usually have, and that's from the school's perspective, which is a little bit unique to this case. I've tried to address, essentially, folks, when I got the staff report, there was an issue about the trees. Talked to staff, what can we do to offer? Listen, I guess I'll say this too. What makes Cumberland Ridge in this area such a nice area, in large part, are those trees. And that's what makes a lot of these lots beautiful and will make them in demand, frankly. So my client's gone ahead and obligated himself to try to do his best to maintain those trees, when in fact that was his intent all along, but we know that it's important to get those conditions in there. The other two things that are pointed out in the staff report, to be frank, one is the wetlands. The last few applications I've had, I still don't know yet how to really address that, frankly. I mean, we have floodplain here we cannot build in. We know that. As Mr. Peterson pointed out, we can't build in sinkholes. We've got to engineer or design around sinkholes. You folks know that those issues come up primarily in DDPs when you get down to the brass tacks of the engineering work and you get down to that point. But I will say, obviously, much of this land is in the floodplain of this land, this ag land. So obviously we're not disturbing that in any way. With regard to the open space, Ben stole my thunder, and that is we're lucky enough that as a part of this request we have the school. And if Tad wants to speak to it, I'll let him. But, folks, if you've seen the schools that they've built lately, the playgrounds, the recreational facilities, all that comes with it, the staff, as Ben mentioned, didn't really consider that in their report. But where the rubber hits the road, folks, there are going to be walking trails from this neighborhood to that school. It'll be a great amenity. And I anticipate this development will have more by way of things to do outside in a walking or on a bike than probably anything we've done in the county. With that, I guess I'll address now the elephant in the room, right? Because if it wasn't for this issue on Shaker Mill Bend Road, I think we'd been out of here already, frankly, because of everything else this development brings with it. But we've got that issue. And let me be frank about this. My client probably feels that they are in as much a position as some of these neighbors are, okay? And I want to say that to the benefit of the neighbors. My client has told me, I will obligate myself to no connection. Chris, if a gate will work, I'll put up a gate. But there's kind of this catch-22 in what the subdivision regs say, and I think we're probably all in the same boat at this point. I'm happy that someone mentioned, and it may have been Mr. Moore, or it may have been someone, that there is another avenue for this issue, and that is the fiscal court. I think as recently as the Drake Ridge subdivision that's out just past the Twin Bridges, there was a road closed in conjunction with Stagecoach Springs. That's been very recently. That was essentially the exact same issue. So I'm here tonight somewhat with hat in hand saying I, on behalf of my client, will do whatever this commission thinks is best to address that issue. But if I were really going to be completely frank, I think that discussion needs to happen before the fiscal court. I'm not sure what else you all can do. I'm not sure what else we can do. But if someone's got a good idea and is more creative than I am, then we're happy to do it. But that's probably where that issue needs to be taken up. I understand the county has said that the roadway out Shaker Mill Bend is proper and sufficient, and but at the same time, Luke's willing to do what he needs to do to disconnect it if he can. That's really all I have to say by way of statement. Luke, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, sir. State your name and address.
Luke Williams, 1550 Weston, Bowling Green.
I'll have you pull the mic. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, ma'am. Luke Williams, 1550 Weston.
And you swear to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a really large presentation, a lot of pictures that talks about the subdivision. What it's going to be is a twin to Cumberland Ridge. The home styles, the home shapes, the walking trail, everything that's there, that's what we're going to have. So everything that I think we have to address tonight is this stub street. And I'm willing today, if the opportunity to build a gate on their end and close the road on their end so that they have the gate code instead of us, I'm willing to do that. I don't know if that's allowed. I don't know if we can, but I'm perfectly willing to put that into my commitment. And instead of the gate code being on my side, the gate code be on their side. Nobody from our subdivision would have the access to go through there.
This may be a question for Hamp, but just to clarify, if there was some way for us to propose a street that only had one-way traffic coming in or going out, you would be in favor of that. Is that correct?
Mr. Graham, if there's a way that we can take that stub street, because we have to build it by the subdivision regulations, which that's expensive. What I would prefer is for all of us to go to fiscal court and let's not build this road. But if fiscal court won't do that, I will put in our binding elements, or I'll put up a bond. I'll do whatever is required to make sure that electronic gate is built at the end of that stub street on their side and this subdivision having no access.
If it's a one-way street, if it's a one-way street, you wouldn't even have to build that.
Well, I think what he's saying is if you're making their gate, so they would have to pull up to it to open it automatically. And if you came from inside the development to it, it doesn't open.
But
Chuck, I mean, from an emergency vehicle, wouldn't that work from that standpoint? Because if the emergency vehicle came off Shaker Bend Road and came right up to it, it's going to open automatically. I'm not a firefighter. Anymore? Used to.
Well, I think that the current technology is there to operate a system like what you're talking about. I don't know if fiscal court will.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
I guess that's my question is we're at this point of saying we can't make a decision on connectivity. Are we now saying that we can make that recommendation to fiscal court about gate, about one lane, about where are we on that, Ham?
You all may adopt any resolution communication you might wish to adopt, but the question of connectivity is not really even before you tonight. Now, I know that
wants to
the
be
Shaker Bend Road folks desperately want it to be, and I don't mean to minimize that in the least, but the question before you tonight is whether or not this use is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, that's the clarification we're looking for.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Moore and Mr. Peterson? Is there a way that Shaker Mill Bend, if they can't get it closed, could they make that end a private street? It still would have access from the other end, and then I'll just build the gate.
But
That's not what we're doing tonight.
We can't.
go ahead, Mr. Moore. I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a comment.
Shaker Mill Bend Road subdivision is not before us tonight. Anything that would be done to modify the use of roads on Shaker Mill Bend Road is not before us tonight, and would require a whole lot of public hearing and consent from lots of people in order to accomplish that. So
My only comment, talking about the road or trying to stop the access, that's leaving one road on Cumberland Trace for that entire subdivision to get out of. And I know you may not want to go through Shaker Mill Bend, and that may not be the convenient way out, but should there be an emergency, a fire, an accident, it may be easy to get the emergency people in, but there may be a time we would want those residents out. And I think we would be foolish
I agree.
to try to have one.
Yeah, same.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
It's
We
same
do not
conversation.
need to do that.
But I really believe tonight, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody, but we can't talk about connectivity.
Yes.
So anybody that's not for us to decide tonight. That's really a fiscal court.
And
That is correct.
Madam
That's-
Chairperson,
we
one
need
of the
to
things that
stay.
we took into consideration, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Houston, is when we did this, we designed our entrance to be a 4-lane boulevard all the way in. So you have 2 lanes of traffic coming in and 2 lanes of traffic going out. So we did maximize that one boulevard entrance to be 4 lanes. And then also the school is doing massive improvements to Cumberland Trace Road in widening and decel and XL and turning lanes and everything that they're doing. So, we think we've tried to address that. I would ask if anybody has any questions other than from you all about the development. We're proposing, we want the green belt to have a walking trail. The walking trails are very similar to that of Cumberland Ridge. Like I said, I could waste another 30 minutes of your all's time and show you videos and drone flights and pictures and all of that. But anybody have any questions, I'd love to address those, and then we'll get to the topic of letting them speak.
got one easy one for
Yes, sir.
you, Luke. Binding element number 1, development plan condition number 1 for the RS 1A portion says there'll be 60 1A lots. Says 80 1A lots. We now know that's going to be 62. And
If you subtracted 18 from that, then you're correct.
And so I ask you, do you agree to amend the binding elements from 80 lots to 62?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Commissioners?
I'm sorry, one other thing too, it's come to our attention through also discussion, the 4 lots that are proposed on Shaker Mill Road, those lots are gonna be at least 1 acre plus, so we'll really only get 3. It's 4-point-something acres, and once we do it, so there's probably one more lot, Mr. Moore, that's gone.
So dealing with that road, you're not going to make any improvements to a 14-foot wide road?
To Shaker Mill,
3 lots.
we're going to get 3 lots and 3 lots only, and I don't believe that should impact anything for that road. We'll do the 3 1.2 acre lots. And I would let our engineers address that, but it didn't affect it at 4, so I'm assuming going down, Mr. Carpenter, it should be good.
Another question for you based upon what I do for a living, which is kind of obvious at this point. Are you willing to sprinkle your RM3 residents? You've got 120 dwelling units there. Would you consider sprinkling those?
certainly would consider sprinkling that, and yes, I'm a proponent of that as well. That these are going to be very, we're modeling this after the Eagle Stone next to the Hancock Bank building. So they're 4 pods, so it's 4 units that are connected. I think most of them are 1 or 1.5, and so these are going to be condominium or patio home style units. I know we have to use that word apartment here, but we don't anticipate any apartments. It is a multifamily, but it's a 4 pod. So
They're all connected. There's going to be a firewall between.
there'll be a firewall between all of them for the condo and the patio wall. So it won't be an apartment style building. I don't plan on building them, but I certainly would not be opposed to there being a sprinklered building. I think.
So would you be opposed to adding something in conditions about RM3 development being sprinkled?
I'm going to have to ask if there's an architect or a designer or somebody. I would not have anything that would oppose that, and I would see no reason why there can't be. And Mr. Moore, I assume there's adequate fire, water service and everything for that to be. It's a question that I never have been asked before. And
Luke, the question I think Chuck's asking, will you put it in as a binding element?
Certainly. I mean, if that follows the building codes of Warren, I just don't know if I'm violating any kind of building code or anything. As long as it's supported by the building code and we could have some kind of language. Mr. Graham, could you help me out here?
We're going to have to address wet system, dry system.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables here that'll have to be addressed. I can't really speak directly to whether you can address that in the binding elements or not. It's worth a shot, but I don't have the full answer. There's a lot of mechanical parts.
I think it's a great question, and I'm going to research it when we leave here because it's never been asked before. But we do a lot of commercial stuff, and that's all sprinkled. And I will say that I am doing a development in Laverne, Tennessee, and any structure above 3,000 square feet, sprinkler system is 100% required. So I'm certain but I've never dealt with that with our building department, sir. So I don't know what all the rules and regulations would be.
And I've written this. If permitted by the Kentucky Building Code, the RM3 structures will contain a sprinkled fire suppression system.
Fair enough. You're welcome.
Commissioners, do you any other questions for the applicant before I open it up to the audience for questions? No questions? Does anyone in the audience have any specific questions? If you have questions, we can ask them now. If you need to give a statement or make a comment, you can do that a little later. But if you have a specific question, we'll get questions first.
Can I ask Mr. Moore one more question, I guess?
Yes.
And so after the Drakes Ridge subdivision and how they went about doing that, I've spoken to a couple of the commissioners, and I know you all can't address that, but they have agreed that they would take up the motion to close this road. So how did that happen for Drakes Ridge? Just after this meeting and during the fiscal court hearing, or after even it was approved by fiscal court?
It was done at fiscal court, wasn't it?
So yes, so the way that happened was this same situation. This body was advised of the exact same thing, that they had to have the connection. That proceeded forward with the recommendation with the connection, and then the fiscal court acted upon the rezoning, and at the same time took it upon themselves to close a portion of that road. So that was all a fiscal court action.
It was after, so it was approved here at this body, and then fiscal court.
With the connection, right.
With the connection, and then fiscal court made the motion to close it.
Right.
And I would support that as well. Thank you.
Anyone in the audience have specific questions for the applicant? Yes, sir, if you'll come to the mic, please. Get your name and address,
Chuck Grant, 1307 Shaker Mill Road.
and you swear to tell the truth.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. You can
One
ask your
question I have, on that flag up there, if that's new development, why can't you take a road from there out to Cemetery Road? Not off Cumberland Trace, on the little square. If I'm looking at it right, is that new construction? Take that straight out to Cemetery Road.
I do not, I'm not purchasing any land that adjoins or buffers Cemetery Road.
Here's the one I'm talking about right here. Taking a road from that out to Cemetery Road. Instead of going through Shaker Mill Bend, come right straight off that. You'd be up there by the school and everything goes straight out.
I don't own any property that, huh?
I'm talking about going out to Cemetery Road though. Can you get to Cemetery Road from there?
Sir, could you get the pointer and show on the map where you're talking about? That may help all of us.
If I'm looking at it, how do you work this
Yes,
thing?
sir. Get you that.
This little bend here, is there any way to get to Cemetery Road from there?
Race.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, sir. State your name and address,
Jeremy Burris. I live at 438 Shaker Mill Bend. I'm the very last house on the left
and you
off
swear to
of
tell
Shaker
the
Mill
truth.
Bend there.
Yes, sir.
What are your plans for separation between my property and I don't want to speak for Derek Depp, which is my neighbor across the street, because he's got more of a line than I do. But what is your plan for that separation between your subdivision and my house?
Yes, sir. If you could pull up the aerial that shows, Jessica, I don't know how to operate this, so somebody.
Jessica, we need you here.
If you can go to like an aerial, I know I have one in my PowerPoint. So I guess that's going to be the best. I don't know how to zoom in. So, sir, what I would propose for the whole development, and like he had said, is every line around it, if there's a mature tree on the whole development above 8 inches, we're going to do everything we can do to maintain that. I was actually out at your all's property today, and there's really not a tree line there between your property.
Could you speak into the microphone? We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. There's not a tree line, ma'am, on where the dead-end road that we've been talking about right now. There's not a tree line. It's a crop line there. And I would certainly be willing to plant vegetation along that that's comparable to all of the rest of the development.
So vegetation is your border between my property and your property?
Yes, I would be willing.
Would you be opposed to a wall if that became an issue?
I would not be opposed to a fence of some time. No, sir.
Can we put that in some sort of writing? Because what's going to happen is you're going to take my fence row, and that's going to expose me to not only all the goings-on on your property, but also there is some sort of separation there of vegetation that helps runoff. And right now, as you look at my property to your property, I'm staring up a hill.
Okay.
And I see a lot of runoff coming my direction.
Yeah.
And that is a concern.
I would propose to go ahead and amend the binding element, Mr. Moore, that property line, because I was out there today and kind of noticed that if they would like to have a privacy fence built there along that property line, we would be glad to do so as well with vegetation.
That's the part that goes into Shaker Mill Bend Road at the very,
What is your address and your neighbor's address, so we could maybe define those two?
I live at 438 Shaker Mill Bend. As far as the neighbor across from me there, I see it every day, but I'm really not sure. Is Ms. Depp here?
Sure. So it would be, this property line right there, be those.
Correct. I live on if you're going down Shaker Mill Bend, I live on the left. Mr. Depp lives on the right.
Yeah.
I'm right here, 441.
Yeah, and it's pretty wide open right there, so we could do a fence or something there and some veg. Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah,
That is
Warner
correct.
Electric cleaned it out a few years ago, I know, at the request of the property owner.
Right. What I would propose is an evergreen style tree and some kind of privacy fence. 6-foot privacy fence, would that be suitable?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that would suffice.
Yeah.
Secondly, if I may, and I know we've only got.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, we can't hear the question or the witness's answer.
And secondly, if I may have a
Thank you.
follow-up question, I know I'm running short on time. And I don't mean to pass my burden off on anyone on Shaker Mill. What would be the issue with bringing a road out on Shaker Mill through your 4 properties on Shaker Mill on the lower end?
It's my understanding that, yeah, it's,
Please, sir, I'm sorry.
so
We
I
can't-
can address that. When we looked at it with Mr. Peterson, and I have had our engineers go out and look at, that portion of Shaker Mill is much narrower than the Shaker Mill. The other average is about 18 feet, 16 to 18 feet, and that's like 12 or 14 back in that area. So I think we should have less traffic there. And it's more compatible with what's around it. Most of those are acre and a quarter style lots, and I believe the 3 lots is just more compatible. Yeah, there's the engineers, ACE Engineering did a survey, and we didn't address that portion because we knew that the major concern was Shaker Mill Bend.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir. Right here. We'll get him next.
My name's Christopher Cox. I live at 1202 Shaker Mill Road. And my
Sorry.
question is about the,
Ready to tell the
Yes.
truth? Thank you.
my question is about the 3 or 4 lots there on Shaker Mill. The utilities, sewer, water, all that, is that going to come in Shaker Mill or is it going to come in through the development?
I would have to defer to my engineers, but I don't believe there will be any construction other than those 3 houses would have just homes built on them. And I had conversation, I believe that those could still be on septic, depending on if sewer was built in this subdivision or close to it, then those 3 lots would have to connect to sewer. But today, if permits were filed today, those 3 lots that would be created on Shaker Mill Road would be under septic tank.
Thank you.
And we had another question? Yes, sir.
Jonathan Hale, 1207 Shaker Mill Road.
Can you
Swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Sir, if you could scroll back, I'm going to need to find the specific image. Yes, sir. Could you show me the pointer, please? Okay, big metal button. My property is right here. This property which you have as a proposed lot directly behind my home, if I am correct, it has a vertical entrance into a cave right middle of that lot. Are you aware of that opening in the ground?
The image that we have shown you all, of course, is just a conceptual plan, one-dimensional. And as it had been addressed, I think a little earlier by Mr. Davenport, any kind of wetlands and/or caves, obviously we can't build on. So, when we show you that lot concept, that's the most that could happen. We're probably going to lose 10 or 15% to depressions and retention and different things like that.
If in fact that lot does have a cave on it, is your intent to still remove the trees that might be providing support around, or would you retain the?
No, if there's a cave on it, we'll just there's nothing we can do.
Okay, and what about a sinkhole? Because it is about a 10-foot vertical surround that drops directly into the ground. And if that's center of your lot, I would think that would pose a concern for a home builder that would build on that later.
Yeah, I mean, we can't build houses or on the sinkhole or the retention. So a lot of times, and I'll let Brian, would you address this, I guess, as far as in an engineering state and how we deal with sinkholes and caves?
Most of the time in residential development,
But we have to swear you in. The other one was for the other case, so we've got to get you on this one. Your name and address.
Brian Shirley, 1136 South Park Drive.
And you swear to tell the truth?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley.
Most of the time in a residential type development, we won't suggest building on top of a sinkhole. There are methods to repairing sinkholes, and we'll do that in commercial or industrial sites, just because the size of the buildings and the number of sinkholes that are around. In residential, we try to avoid those and try to leave the existing vegetation just so that we don't disturb the natural flow of the water.
So if that lot is not going to be built on, would you put that in the binding agreement, that you would retain the trees and the? Okay.
What we've agreed to on the whole development, that whole thing, that if there's not a road running down the middle of it, basically, and something that we have to do, any tree with an 8-inch caliber or larger, we're going to maintain on that whole development.
Now, would that be the lot as proposed, or would you adjust the lot to still use a portion of that property that's currently proposed as that lot? Yes, sir.
So, just to try to, so you understand, this isn't a subdivision plat, okay, if I can see that clicker?
Yes, sir.
These lots have not, man, if I have, sure that I can, wrong way. Okay, let's see. So this isn't a subdivision plat yet.
Okay.
Okay, so what Mr. Shirley was describing is there are engineering hurdles on every piece of property.
Yes, sir.
And when you get into much more detailed engineering work is when you come in and you decide, and if in fact you cannot, I think you're down here somewhere, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you get in there and you physically cannot engineer a lot there, with all this, that will change some. Those lot lines will move over. So this is a concept plan. There's no lot that's been platted that Mr. Williams can obligate himself to do away with, because it doesn't exist yet. Does that make sense? So conceptually, this is how we think that the development will flow and how it will be created. But you've got to be able to be flexible if there are those types of things on the property you have to work around.
Okay. So as a conceptual drawing, was this done based on aerial footage only, or have y'all actually surveyed the height of the elevations above the floodplain as well?
No, the floodplain is established topographically, and in fact, these folks maintain that. You can go on their website and get all that, and obviously the engineers do that with more detail.
Okay. Now, in regards to the walking trail that has now been added to go through this area, this is also my property right here. So where exactly is that walking trail going to be? Is it going to be on the high elevation or down at the floodplain?
At this time, yeah. At this time, once again, conceptually, we don't know where exactly every lot's going to work out, but I think that the Cumberland Ridge subdivision was successful in having sidewalks that led to a green trail, which is going to be tied in with the school, which they have agreed to, and then we're envisioning a path that would get down to the, if I could borrow the pointer, which one do you hit? I think we're envisioning that trail bordering the bottom of the floodplain, similar to how it does over by Kariakis Park and other places. But once again, it's not designed and laid out. It will depend on the layout of the lots.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much,
Thank
Chair
you.
Runner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any other specific questions? Yes, sir.
Mike Tennell, 385 Wagon Trail.
Swear to tell the truth.
Oh, sorry. There we go. I need that other slide, the one that has the... Yeah, I don't know. It has the Cumberland Ridge one in it clearly. Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't know, there, oh, well, that was it.
Right there. That's Cumberland
That's
Ridge right
Cumberland
there.
Ridge.
Well, the one, go back two more, that was actually the one I was looking at.
Right
All right,
there.
okay, right there where the Cumberland Ridge section that's getting taken out. There we go. All right, right here, this is being taken out. My concern right here is this steep hill and this marsh here. Is this all woods? This is all woods and a tree line right here, and this is all woods going back in here. Is this going to be taken out? And all this water that comes in down this hill and fills this up, I'm afraid it's going to get backed up into my property, because it does now, because sometimes the flow to this field gets hampered. I'm sure that's going to be addressed in a way to keep that water from flowing, I guess, underneath these people's houses or wherever you go with it.
Yeah, we can't allow any more water to go off-site than what's going there today. And if you're having a water issue now, we may be able to look at the engineering to try to divert.
No, I mean,
some of the water.
there's a creek bed there.
Okay.
That just everything from the highway, everything comes down there into that creek bed and flows like a river into that field.
Okay.
And I mean, I had a canoe on there once, right here. Okay? I just don't know what I did. But I took my kids out on a canoe in there.
Right.
That's probably why Cumberland Ridge, you know, they built up a little bit to keep that from happening. But I'm concerned, is that they gonna build up and back me up?
No, we can't push any water onto you.
Okay, that was a concern. Besides looking into someone's, backyard. But
Once again, we'll address all water issues at a later date, and we have already agreed 100% to maintain the mature trees that border that property line as well as all of the property lines.
Thank you, sir. Just by show of hands, how many people are in opposition to this request? As is, this request to change the zone right now, this application, those that are opposed to this application. Okay. Okay, they don't want it. There you go. Those who do not want this. All right, thank you. That way we can get an idea. I don't know if opposition, do you all have a spokesperson? You have a spokesperson. Okay, that person will be allowed the same time. Mr. Davenport, I'm sorry, I assumed you were finished. I apologize. Are you? Yes, sir. Yes. And if you'd state your name and address, please, ma'am.
My name is Nicole Bennett, and I live at 277 Shaker Mill Bend.
And you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Did everyone receive our petition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
As I said, I've lived on Shaker Mill Bend for about 10 years now, and they actually elected me to be the spokesperson of the people that have signed the petition. So, as everyone is well aware, we are not for the connectivity. And I think, we're not opposing the development. We're fine with the development. We just don't want the traffic coming through our neighborhood. Reason being, obvious reasons, safety reasons. And we feel that the connectivity does not actually coincide with the subdivision regulations. And as Mr. Moore said, we have to meet the subdivision regulations. And I'll explain this to you. The road that is actually adjoining the proposed new development, Shaker Mill Bend, is 24 feet wide. But in order to get to Cemetery Road, which is the main servicing road from our neighborhood to town or wherever, you have to go on to Shaker Mill. There's no other option. Shaker Mill does not meet the subdivision regulations. And also within those regulations, as they brought forward earlier, planning and zoning can, they can actually approve an exemption based off of safety, if need be. And then also in their standards, 57S, it talks about adjoining existing roadways. And we know that that road is actually Shaker Mill Bend, that roadway would have to meet the regulation, but we also feel Shaker Mill has to meet that regulation because it connects directly to Shaker Mill to Cemetery Road. And as you all addressed earlier, you would want to use that for fire trucks, police cars, emergency services. But, the road as it stands right now with the 81 houses that we have out there is not safe. We actually went to the magistrate just about 4 or 5 months ago and asked that we get a center yellow line because we've had people with their side view mirrors knocked off. We've had a head-on collision out there. We've had cars run off the road and knocked down mailboxes. And this is all the time occurrences due to the fact of the road being so narrow. They said that the county deemed our road or that road safe, and I'm not for sure how the county can say that when they came out and measured. They told us our road was 14 to 16 feet, and that it wasn't even. They couldn't even deem it a 2-lane road, and we couldn't have a center line. But then now they're saying that, the road is safe for this new traffic to come down. So I don't know if we're getting, and the person, I think his name is, they actually came out and measured the road. His name is Jerry Young, and I understand he's the county road superintendent, and he was actually the one that came out and measured and told us that Shaker Mill measured anywhere between 14 to 16 feet and that it was not wide enough for 2 lanes. According to subdivision regulation, we have to have 2 lanes, and they have to be 12 feet on each side. Also, according to Appendix A, street standard graphics, the road classification that we currently have is local residential with no curbs. That should be 25 feet wide, and it's not. Also, Exhibit 5.1 states that the road should not measure greater than an 8% grade. Measurements have been done, and we have places that do not meet that standard on our road. And that is one of the reasons that planning and zoning can make an exemption for connectivity. Also, another thing it states in there is right-of-way measurement. It must be 50 for local residential non-sewer. But also, if you go on the Kentucky Department of Transportation website, once our road is opened up, our road will no longer be considered local residential non-sewer. It will be a collector minor road, which actually the standards seem to be a little bit more strict with that as well. And our road does not meet that. Also, another thing that it doesn't meet is speed limit. The current speed limit on the road is 35 miles per hour, and Exhibit 5.1 states that both classifications, the miles per hour should not exceed 30. So, we definitely feel like, to planning and zoning, we definitely feel like for safety purposes that you all could grant the exception of not doing the connectivity. We do understand that there's a need for emergency services to use another road. But, I feel like it's not safe for emergency services to come down our road if it's not safe for a single car to go down. You know, as I said, we have had lots of accidents, and these are not just sporadic. So we would like for you all to think about that, planning and zoning, as far as exemptions go. Also, in the zoning change staff report, it does say that a traffic study for our road was waived. And we do feel like that the traffic study should not be waived, and that might, you know, that could have been waived by the county as well. But it says on the website, the application for a waiver, it does say that it cannot be granted if the study results will adversely affect public health, safety, or welfare, or alter the essential character of general vicinity. Obviously, we have safety issues. So we do feel like that the traffic study should not have been waived. Obviously, you know, we have issues on our road right now with 81 homes that have not been fixed. We have gone to the county about the issues, and you know, they have not been fixed. We feel that when we add 400 plus more homes to that, the possibility that that many more homes will be able to access our neighborhood with the roads the way that they are, I mean, that is not safe at all. At all. And this week, or the past couple of weeks, I think planning and zoning has heard from our neighborhood a lot. And you know, we just want to say to them, we know that you all can issue the exemption for safety purposes. We do wish that a traffic study would be done. We do wish that, you know, we've obviously done measurements. The county's come out and done measurements as well. We do wish that planning and zoning would come out and take their own measurements, you know, if need be. You know, also another thing that has been brought to my attention by some of the neighbors is that there are several developments off of Cumberland Trace Road that do only have one access point. And that does include the large multifamily complexes that are currently being developed. And so we were kind of in question as to if other developments are allowed to just have one access point, then why are we having to use the connectivity rule or the stub street rule for our, you know, for our road for this development? I mean, I think that pretty much covers everything that we want to cover from our standpoint. You know, another thing to think about with this is that, you know, Shaker Mill Bend Road is already not regulated. Shaker Mill Road is already not regulated for current subdivision standards. And with the current traffic that's on there, it does cause traffic conditions to be bad at times, and we have had accidents. So we do feel that with our expression to planning and zoning and to you all of our safety concerns, and that we feel like you know, regulations are being violated per se, that, you know, that in case of an accident or, you know, a death or something like that, that, you know, the city, county, or the state would be liable. So, you know, that's something else we want you all to think about too.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
My name is Steve Owen. I'm at 999 Shaker Mill Road, and I promise to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Obviously, I live on Shaker Mill Road. You may have never heard of me, but I do have family here in town. My father was Charlie Stewart with Warren Row Electric. My mother's Barbara Stewart from the Square, and Susan Heckner is now running that shop, and she's opened a new place across the corner. So we've been here. I left here 30, 40 years ago, went to Texas, and right before I left, I did graduate from Western sometime last century. Shaker Mill is about as close as you can get to town without actually being there. So before I went to Texas, I lived on Old Scottsville Road. When I decided to move back here, I went out there looking for a house. But I found it was very difficult to get back to town or get back home. So went over on Cemetery Road looking, and Shaker Mill was perfect. The Cemetery Road is just a whole lot easier to get to town on. Of course, when Shaker Mill Road was built, it was about 16 foot wide, and then that would have been a common size rural road at that time. Of course, you also had 31W to get to Louisville on, so instead of, 6, 8 lanes out there now? Shaker Mill Road gets to be quite a handful when you're coming around the corner and meet one of those 3-tiered hay haulers that's wider than the road. So sometimes you got to back up and let him go on so you can get back. It's got some quick little hills with an apex of the curve coinciding with the crest of the hill. So if you can kind of visualize that, you can't see over the hill and around the corner until you're on top of the hill. The 24-foot pavement that's in their plans, and it's part of the subdivision deals, matches Shaker Mill Bend. But you can't get out of there without going down Shaker Mill Road. It's 14 foot, so they say, with no shoulder in some places, quick turns and short hills. Maybe there should have been a traffic study. The subdivision regs we've already discussed is, to our way of looking at it, it can be not built. Now, obviously, every time we think we got a path, you can't do that, or it's not in the regs or whatever. But what? All right. Well, just remember one thing. They're going to tell you how sweet it is, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Thank you, sir. Do we have anyone else that would like to make a statement?
Something's
Mike, nobody else has brought it up.
Yes, sir. State your name.
Down by the creek.
Your name and address.
David Cowan, 220 Shaker Mill Bend.
Yes, sir, and you swear to tell the
Down
truth.
by the creek, where you come off Cemetery Road, it's real wide, and then it narrows down, and you got a 2.5 foot drop off on this side, and you got a guardrail over here. I've already lost one truck, totaled out there. Well, in the wintertime, that stays ice 30% of the winter. I mean, it stays ice. It does never unthaw. And if you come up through there, you top that hill right there, and if it's ice, ever who's coming up it and you meet it, and that's what happened. A lady come up through there, and it was still icy, and she seen me top the hill. Well, she got scared, and she had that drop off there. Well, she overcorrected. When she did, she come over and hit me and knocked me clean over into the guardrail. I mean, it is a dangerous road. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir. This is anyone that wasn't represented by your spokesperson. Yes, sir.
David Romer. I live at 294 Drakes Creek Street, and I'll swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Something that, to further emphasize the danger, I think, aspect of the Shaker Mill Road is the county has stated that no improvements are needed, and yet this construction traffic has been excluded. And I was told because Shaker Mill Road could not handle it. So think about that.
Thank you, sir.
You.
Yes, ma'am.
Of 304 Shaker Mill Bend. I swear to tell the truth. I
Thank
just
you.
have actually a question for Mr. Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there ever consideration, because there is such concern about having only one entrance and exit out of this division, was there ever, it looks like it would be easy to put one to the south end of the school development that connects to Cumberland Trace that could potentially ease and give two entrances and exits to this subdivision without them having to use Shaker Mill as an alternative? Right here.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we considered that, but per the regulations, I could have had 10 entrances on Cumberland Trace Road, and I'm still required by them to connect to Shaker Mill Bend.
I understand that,
Right.
but it would lessen the need.
Well, the
for
school,
people to
and I
use
guess it
that.
would be the engineer in the school study, from other school projects, the school stacking and all that, we wanted to keep internal all into the school, so all the school traffic kind of stays consolidated to it. Because that does kind of come and go at the same time every day. They start at the same time, they leave at the same time, where everybody who lives in the subdivision comes and goes at various times.
So the children that leave the school, or the pickup line, if I understood the drawing correctly, it almost looked like the pickup line and drop-off line for the school is going to be in the back side of the school. What's to keep people from coming through Shaker Mill to line up to pick their children up?
I didn't really, you might have to have the engineer, I didn't understand the question exactly.
So if there's only one entrance to the school here, what's to keep people from lining up back in here to get here to pick up their children right here? Where's the line? Because right now, Cumberland Trace line starts an hour before school lets out and it backs up.
Well, the school has taken provisions, and I don't know who's here, but internally, they're stacking over 300 cars.
Okay, I see
inside.
that, and that's better.
Yeah, they're stacking all of that internally. And
Okay.
you see, we're not, so the two school entrances are both independent completely of the subdivision entrance.
Okay.
They can't get from here to there.
Okay, that helps actually. That helps ease my mind a little bit on that.
Okay, thank you.
And it does. But they're exiting directly onto the road.
315 every day.
Please don't talk from.
This drawing's a little more helpful, I promise.
Yeah, so if we can go back to that drawing, so if you'll,
He'll try to explain that now that's a lot.
I think it's very light and hard to see, but the subdivision street's here, okay? And as you can see in this concept drawing, there's no connectivity. The school has its, buses are gonna come in as proposed. The buses would come in here, and that would be their parking, all on this half. The drop-off and pickup would come in here, and it does that for almost a little over 300 cars. That's what the drawing says, so
Pat, is that something you're prepared to discuss?
Name and address, please.
Ed Pardue, 1010 College Street.
You swear to tell the truth.
I do, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
I represent the Warren County Board of Education. I can tell you that what you see here was the case with Mr. Williams' proposal. It is in concept, but I can tell you that this is something very similar to what's being done at the Jennings Creek Elementary School, which is being constructed right now, and that is configuring the pickup drop-off such that the stacking, which is the term they use of the vehicles, all occurs on the school premises.
So ideally, the purpose there, just for the record, is to keep that traffic from spilling back off onto the roadway.
You don't want a Briarwood Elementary situation, if any of you are familiar with that.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, and will, the school district be required to, as has been referenced earlier, be required to work with the transportation cabinet in configuring those entrances and exits from the school property on and off of Cumberland Trace Road. Will be required to make certain improvements that the state requires. But to answer your question directly, the plan is, and the intent will be to stack those pickup drop-off cars all on the schools. I think it's 22 acres such that, well, they don't have access to the development actually, but such that they don't even back up onto Cumberland Trace.
Thanks, Tate.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I don't know if you want to address any of the issues, or if you just want to make a statement. Yes, I think that has been.
If I may, I would
yes,
like to address
please. You have a few things.
The
yes,
subdivision regs and some of the stuff referenced during the petition. So,
okay.
And how our staff versus the, in this case, Warren County Public Works staff and the City of Bowling Green staff look at possible exceptions to the connectivity, the stub streets, whatever. So Section 5.7S of the subregs were addressed here tonight in the street standard. So it states that any substantial development of subdivided property may reasonably be anticipated to create a burden on existing public roads, thereby proposing a traffic and safety hazard. In order to mitigate that hazard and to advance the interest in having a safe and adequate roadways, any proposed subdivision abutting an existing public roadway which does not meet the right-of-way and pavement width standards for the functional classification of that street shall be upgraded by the developer to meet the requirements as outlined in Exhibit 5.1, which was also referenced, which was the design standards. But it also says, if required by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, city or county engineer, or public works department. So the way we look at those developments, as we do that in partnership with our sister agencies, our planning staff has certain talents and skills. Transportation design and expertise is not necessarily one of them, so that's why we rely on our sister agencies. To clarify some of those design standards, so all the developer, all the traffic impact study does is look at a development and anything within a quarter mile of that proposed development of that internal street system. So that is what the traffic impact study does. It also only looks at the level of service, or which equates to delay of existing roadways. It analyzes whether or not those delays are significant enough to warrant improvements on those streets that are within a quarter mile only by roadway of that. So that's what a traffic impact study does. But what we also do is, in lieu of, is require improvements. So it may very well be that a traffic impact study would come back and require less than what the developer has agreed to for this particular development. So that is where we get the development plan condition that was agreed upon to do left and right turn lanes, both at any entrance on Cumberland Trace Road, as well as separate left and right turn lanes out of the development. And then we have the connectivity requirement. That is a fairly hard standard, and if our sister agency staff does not determine that there is an improvement to be made on an adjacent roadway, then we have no exception to grant for the connectivity. So adjacent roadway is important, so it's long been the standard and policy of Warren County, to my understanding, that the adjacent roadway is what is looked at, and that is Shaker Mill Bend Road. And as you can see by the information provided by ACES, the spot checks of widths, that is in line with the 24-foot wide pavement. So how that's applied to the rest of the county when looking at any other development in Warren County, the minimum standard for connection is only 18 feet wide, not 24 feet wide. With that comes the recognition over time that 24 feet's a little narrow. So any new developments, new subdivisions, and I'm not sure when date that came about, but certainly was in place when Shaker Mill Bend Road was developed. The new requirement is 24 feet. So that is why you see the difference in between the two roads. The road grades that were presented, there's some question, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to know this, but the question that was brought up is, are the measurements and the percent grades that were presented in the petition, is that the actual roadway grades? or is that the embankments on the side of the roadways that are those percentage? The County Public Works Director. Thank you, sir. The County Works Director, when they went out and looked at, did not find any grades that exceeded the 8%. So that's the information that we got in our office to base our decisions on. The language that was referenced to the health, safety, and welfare comments, what that language has got from is from our variance and waivers, which is specific language parroted from the KRS 100 statutes relating to those applications only. So those do not necessarily pertain to those applications in the sense that it was presented. But you all obviously keep that in mind as you make your decisions there. As far as the measurements of road, Mr. Jerry Young was referenced, and also Mr. Josh Moore is the Public Works Director, and we do consult them on every single development that comes to you all, and we do take all of their information under consideration, and any comments they have, we do pass that along to you. That is part of the nature of what the staff report has in it. And the last question is, why is Stubbs Street for this development not the multifamily street down the road? The incompatible use statement that is also in here applies, and multifamily has been deemed incompatible uses and adjacent to single family. Here we have single family connecting to single family in that one section. So and then we have the stuff I referenced in my memo, that this street was constructed in order for future development. So that future development appears to be now. So therefore, that is how we arrived at that determination, that there is no exception here that we see could be granted. And, so therefore the Stubbs Street was required to continue that street system. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Davenport.
Thank you, Chair. Now I will endeavor to be extremely, extremely brief. Essentially, what the commission has heard, I believe, if it would be fair to summarize, were concerns somewhat about traffic, more so about connectivity. And I appreciate Mr. Peterson's statement there in response to some of those concerns, where I think he's kind of again stolen my thunder, and what he's told the commission is that from the traffic standpoint, my client has done everything that all those agencies asked. Those people that are more knowledgeable about the traffic improvements, and I appreciate his point, because we often hear about why was a waiver, why did the developer do a traffic waiver? And if you listen closely to Ben, we don't really waive it. It's when the planning staff and the transportation authorities basically ask us to waive it and say, we don't really care about what your TIS would say, because these are the improvements that need to be made. So, these are what we're going to require, because these are what need to be done. So that's what we agreed to in this case. The bigger issue, obviously, is connectivity. And if I were to boil that down, folks, frankly, and I think we covered this about an hour and a half ago, that's not a ground to deny the application, because that's what's required by the regs and the comprehensive plan. So I think we've had a greater debate tonight about whether we should strive for connectivity. But as the comp plan reads and the regs read, that's what's required. The last thing I'll say in just summary, again, I'm happy that I'm able to present a mixed residential type development that no one's complaining about. No one's complaining about the different RM3, the RS1C, and the RS1A, and how those things meld together. So someone did a good job developing that. And I'm proud to say that hopefully I'm a part of rezoning a piece of property. It's going to be a new school. That's also in this application. Those are intertwined. So I would urge a motion and a vote to approve the zone map amendment. Appreciate your time very much. Thank you all.
Commissioners, do you all have anything to add, ask, or comment about before I call for a motion? Any? comments? Anything you need to clarify? Yes.
The question was whether or not the opposition had had an opportunity to do a closing statement.
Oh, they did have a spokesperson. Yes, the spokesperson, I apologize, I do. You do have the opportunity to give a closing if you would like to do that. I do apologize for overlooking you.
You're fine. Obviously, he has had an answer. Ben, is that Ben? Mr.
Yeah,
Peterson.
Ben Peterson,
Sorry.
yes.
He did have an answer to, to a lot of the things that we talked about. And we are aware that the abutting or adjoining does mean Shaker Mill Bend Road. We just keep driving that point on Shaker Mill Road, because it is so bad. We wish that you all would, obviously, grant the, think about it differently because of Shaker Mill Road. And like we said before, we are not opposed to the development, so we feel like with the connectivity rule, if they're not going to oppose, then maybe our next step is fiscal court, to try to close the road. But, I think basically I feel like we supported everything that we had to say about Shaker Mill Road and the connectivity, so.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Just add to kind of support what you're saying too. So when the county staff looks at those improvements, it was discussed if there were any improvements that could be made, at least to the section of Shaker Mill Road from Shaker Mill Bend Road to Cemetery Road. But the county staff feels like they don't have the authority. It goes above and beyond what they normally would require any developer to do. We did discuss some potential improvements, spot improvements and others with the developer, but there was no authority by the county staff to ask for those improvements. If that is something that the neighborhood would like and would live with, if you can't close it, however you all want to proceed with that, then that might be something else you can present it to fiscal court as well.
And I think that you're right about that. And we have asked for improvements, and we did ask for the center line, and we were told the road wasn't wide enough, which it's not wide enough for 2 lanes. So I think we probably will proceed with that.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Go
Can
ahead.
I do one little housekeeping? Mr. Williams, if you'll come up again. Mr. Burris and Mr. Depp came forward, lots 24 and 25 of Shaker Mill Bend subdivision, and I thought I heard you agree with them that you would construct a landscape buffer or fence on the property line bordering their lots 24 and 25 of Shaker Mill Bend subdivision. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, sir, and we have a map that you had me circle those, and they came up, and I have circled that and initialed all of those changes to this plat.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If we might ask Chris if he had anything further that he wanted to.
No, sir.
Okay.
Nothing else. Okay. Commissioners, comments, questions? Then I will ask for a motion, please.
Make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and condition upon a general development plan docket 2018-37Z County. Based upon the testimony and the documents presented at this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the following actions: LU 111, LU 112, LU 113, LU 2, LU 21, LU 231, TR21, CF53, CF6, CF61, NCR 241, HN21, HN4. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Have a second. Thank you.
Commissioner Coppinger? This is not a simple yes or no. This is a good development. Appreciate your consideration for sprinkling the multifamily residences. That's a first. Appreciate that. You got a rotten 14-foot road out there. I hope that some other body that either sits in this building or in the county building or in the federal, not federal, but state can address that. I took my vehicle out there today. It's not right. It's not right. I can only vote yes for this development, though, and I really hope somebody else in another capacity than this board can address that concern.
All right, that was a yes. I just wanted to verify. Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Balance?
Yes.
Commissioner Vitale? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Madison?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Houston?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. Motion carried. Our recommendation will be for approval. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll give a minute for the room to clear.
There's our mat. You should have called Rex up here. Their magistrate.
What's the next step for the fiscal court on Shaker Mill Days?
I think if we don't have any new business, we can go ahead and adjourn if you want.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.